Thanks, Mike, for the introduction and for the great job you're doing every day at CEQ. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of what we're doing here tonight, but first I have to give a few more thank yous. First to NOAA Administrator Kathy Sullivan for her work, NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden, NASA Chief Scientist Dr. Ellen Stofan, as well as the President's Advisor and Chief Timekeeper, John Holdren, Peter Colohan, and Brian Ford. This is a government-wide effort, and it's been an all-hands-on-deck approach. I want to give a special thanks to Bina Venkataraman, who is the Senior Advisor for Climate Change and Innovation with OSTP and CEQ, for her hard work in lining up the many exciting public and private sector initiatives you're going to hear about in tonight's program. She's a force of nature and has corralled all these people to make these commitments. As Mike said, climate change is obviously a monumental environmental, economic, and security challenge. It's real, it's driven by human activity, and it's happening right now. That's why the President believes that we have a moral obligation to act now to curb climate change. Last June, the White House released, as you know, the President's Climate Action Plan, which is an ambitious and wide-ranging policy agenda to cut greenhouse gas emissions, drive international cooperation, and make our communities more resilient to the climate effects that we won't be able to avoid. The Climate Data Initiative is a crucial part of that effort. While we must continue our efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and invest in alternative energy and make our homes and businesses and public buildings more energy efficient, there are going to be climate events that we cannot avoid. And that's why it's essential that we give local communities the information and tools that they need to protect themselves from today's climate impacts and to plan ahead for tomorrow's and the future. Since taking office in 2009, President Obama has worked to make the vast troves of public data held by the federal government available to the public through the Open Data Initiative. Technology innovators have used that data to create apps and grow businesses. We're taking steps today to put more data in the hands of communities as they seek to anticipate and adjust to the impacts of climate change, and to partner with the private sector and the nonprofit sector to give them the tools and methods they need to understand and apply that data. I want to just briefly highlight a few of the many commitments, public and private, that are being made today. First, today marks the launch of a new climate community pilot on the data.gov platform. The first release will focus on coastal flooding and sea level rise and will include more than 100 high-quality data sets and tools for local communities and communities of innovators. For the first time, mapping information about hundreds of thousands of infrastructure and geographical features across the U.S. will be made public by the USGS, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. These data will be crucial in helping communities plan for floods and other climate impacts. For decades, NOAA and NASA have been leaders in bringing climate and weather data to the American public. Today, those agencies are announcing a Coastal Flooding Innovation Challenge to bring together entrepreneurs, technologists, and developers to develop tools and simulations that will show people how vulnerable they and their communities are to climate change and give them the tools to do something about it. These public sector releases and competitions are amplified and made more powerful by the private sector partners we have here today. Esri, the company that makes the ArcGIS software used by thousands of city planners, will be leveraging its platforms to help communities better plan for climate impacts. Intel will host hackathons in New Orleans, San Jose, and the Chesapeake Bay region. Google will be making huge amounts of cloud storage available to house climate data. It's an impressive list, and those are just 3 of the commitments being made here today. Climate change is a global challenge. Every community, every company, every person will, in one way or another, experience the effects of climate change. That's why it's so important that we work together across sectors, each bringing our own resources, expertise, and abilities to the table to tackle this issue head on. The projects you're about to learn about this evening are a great step in that direction, but we can't stop here. The The President's budget for fiscal 2015 includes a proposal for a $1 billion climate resilience fund, part of which would be dedicated to supporting the Climate Data Project. I'm confident that the Resilience Fund would spur huge public and private investments in community preparedness, in green infrastructure, and in innovative data and planning tools. And I'm hopeful that Congress will appropriate those funds to protect communities across the country. Now, we might be waiting a little while for that to happen, and our communities and our children can't wait. We need to build public-private data commitments on other climate challenges like food security and drought, and we'll be doing that in the months to follow. We need to see more companies from the tech sector and other industries standing up and taking responsibility for helping solve this challenge. We need all of you in the room tonight to go back to your companies, to your conferences, to go to the press and talk about what you can do to spread the information and help communities plan for the climate impacts that we know are coming. And we need to take all of these tools to the developing countries that are posed to suffer the most from climate change. One of the great ironies, the people who contribute the least will suffer the most from sea level rise, from food insecurity, from drought, from lack of water resource. And we need to help those communities prepare for the future, and the World Bank and Rockefeller Foundation commitments really demonstrate a commitment to make this a global public good. With the Climate Data Initiative and the other elements of the Climate Action Plan, the administration, of course, is working every day and at every level to combat climate change. We need you to join us in that effort, not just today, but in the months and years to come. Now I'm pleased to welcome to the stage one of the private sector leaders making a big commitment to the Climate Data Initiative today, Jack Dangermond, the CEO of ESRI. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and it's a great pleasure and a great honor for me to be here and share a little bit about my community. My community is my company builds software for geographic information system management. We call it GIS. Has anybody heard of that before? Okay, good. Well, these users of GIS actually live in local government and utility companies in the private sector. This is just a map of all the local government users. And they're using it for planning, they're using it for engineering, they're using it for response to disasters, a whole series of segments of different activities. It's kind of an infrastructure platform. So what we're doing is engaging with different federal organizations to read directly in climate information directly from NOAA, directly from USGS as services that can empower all of these state and local and private sector organizations with tools that can bring climate change information to life. Well, what are they doing? Well, already local governments are monitoring and predicting data, making predictions in their local government. These are just a few examples: predicting flooding, predicting economic impacts of various kinds of changes. Some of the other users are doing planning and designing, everything from green building design to urban design of various types, looking at solar potential on rooftops, for example, using various kinds of data sets. Other ones are managing and taking action, particularly during emergencies. First responders, many of them are users, are taking information like climate change and automating the routing of snowplows, for example, for those of you who live in Washington, D.C. It's meant to be, it was supposed to be a joke, but anyway. And setting up common operating pictures for their own local government about telling everybody in the community what's going on. Some of them are collaborating and communicating with government information on the web, creating new kinds of social networks. Volunteerism is being spurned by these kind of map with geographic data sets behind it. And these activities are happening at all kinds of scales. They're happening in micro scales, neighborhood scales. This kind of technology is also being used as a framework for the IPCC models, in this particular case, the ensemble model that visually shows very clearly what's going to happen to the Arctic with respect to heat. So my message is GIS becomes a framework for taking climate information into cities and making them more resilient, leveraging community data, expertise in communities with technology and scientific information. Today we're announcing three things. First, the engineering effort to wire in government data, open data of all types as services into our platform. So it goes out to these 340,000 organizations around the world, not just in the US, but certainly in the US. Second, we're announcing a partnership for resilience community. As we speak, this portal is being launched with a dozen key cities who are participating, sharing their information. And also in the room here are a number of professional organizations who have joined on this to bring in the engineering community and the city management community and NACO, and you can sort of look at it. Maybe you can't read it, but I only have so much time, so I've got to just notice all of you. The notion is creating and sharing knowledge of how to use this climate information to make cities more resilient. And then last week we announced an app challenge. We had 2,500 software developers out in California and challenged them to build apps on top of this information for communities. Also, our users are being requested to do the same thing. Tens of thousands of government agencies, businesses, academics, NGOs like Trust for Public Lands, others are taking this on with the idea of developing creative ideas and solutions and apps and sharing them through this portal. We're going to award the winners of this at our summer conference this summer together with members of the White House. This stuff is actually already being used to provide a more open and resilient world. And I've just assembled a couple of demonstrations. This one is showing the sea level rise as it affects population. You can see it's being overlaid on top of population, how many people will be displaced given a 1 meter sea level rise. Here in the mid-Atlantic, or zooming on into New York, you can see, gee, in this area, just taking a simple model, 770,000 people displaced with 1 meter. Interesting. It visualizes it. So I was able to tell you a GIS story of impaction very quickly. At a totally different scale, this is Gloucester, and we're not here working on sea level rise, we're looking at flooding that's as a result of a hurricane. This is overlaid on things like streets that are in a GIS showing impaction, all the flooded structures, also the kinds of population that are there, for example, low-income population or population that is elderly, people that need to be displaced. Very practical pipelining information into GISs that are there. Some of our users, like City of Charlotte, is publishing a website about all of the green projects that are going on, communicating with the public through story maps, showing projects that they're actually engaged in. And in cities like the city of Philadelphia, they're building full 3D cities, not only to visualize as built, but then using it as a framework for doing something I call geodesign, where you can put in a new building and quickly share through a browser, no plugins, the whole city, visualize it, and let people look at both before the as-built and also the after. This is visual impact analysis, but also what is the increased runoff, what's the increased use of infrastructure, and so on. So this is a template with a new technology called City Engine, which allows us to take a profile of levels of density of cities and do something like SimCity, game out alternative futures so we can understand the consequences, sort of like Philadelphia is doing just with the visual dimension, but with all the dimensions, making cities smarter. Well, they have to have government data about our best science of predicting what's going to happen in the context of this. The final thing I'll simply show is taking Landsat information. Every night we load it into the Amazon cloud and make it available to people to show change analysis, not just pictures of it, but also we can flip and do on-demand analytics showing NDVI measures, soil moisture measures, other kinds of interpretive measures. And this is bringing government data into the hands of normal little old cities who are working in a kind of impoverished way, but want to have access to the powerful data from NASA and NOAA and USGS and others that are making these kind of forecasts. So gives you a flavor for what GIS community is doing. This announcement today will not only bring new technologies to this community and new data to this community, but I think more importantly, it'll allow us to share what each other's communities are doing, best practices. So one community does something great, another community can take it in open source, take the open source technology and begin to apply it in various ways. Thank you very much.
I want to congratulate Jack Dangerman for finishing on time and setting a great example for the rest of the group. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Catherine Sullivan, Undersecretary of Commerce and the Administrator of NOAA. She is a key leader in the Climate Data Initiative. She has many incredible accomplishments in her resume, but the one I always have to brag about is she was the first American woman to walk in space. She flew on 3 shuttle flights during her 15-year career as an astronaut, including the mission that deployed the Hubble telescope. Kathy.
Thank you, John. We're a few days away from a grand anniversary for the Hubble. I'm normally the person that everyone hates to follow because of the cool slides, but I have to tell you in this audience, I should have known better to ever follow Jack Dangerman. I want to thank all of my colleagues from other federal agencies and obviously our colleagues from the White House for putting this on the agenda as the President has done, and then charging us all with driving forward so ambitiously to do what we're doing here today and really launch some next key elements in an initiative that's been a long time going and already has some good momentum to it. As we all know, we live on a very dynamic planet. It's an evolving and ever-interacting set of systems. NOAA's mission is not merely to observe our planet, but act in a very active way to transform the data that come from those observations into actionable and action-oriented data that is needed by decision makers in communities around the world and across this country. Very much the sorts of things that Jack was illustrating. At NOAA, we call this environmental intelligence. And providing it, completing that value chain from the measurement to the actionable, action-oriented information is at the core of what we do. The importance of environmental intelligence, which we know from our everyday experience with weather and rain and snow to the kinds of phenomena that Jack was just talking about, the importance is that it gives us foresight. It gives us the ability to look ahead, to think ahead, to analyze ahead, and make sense of alternative courses of action that lie before us. It reduces some of the uncertainties that we face from head of household to head of state as we contemplate a very dynamic future. It is this kind of environmental intelligence brought forward through the stores of data that we're talking about today, the kinds of tools that we're talking about today. That is what it will take to take the notion of resilience off the pages of policy documents and really put it into life and put it into practice in our communities across the country. The President, as John has said, both Johns have said, has made the importance of developing this resilience for our country and its communities very, very clear through all the actions ranging from the release of his plan through subsequent executive orders and indeed the initiative that we're here to do today. This is the kind of strong foundation for a dynamic future that our nation really needs. It all does start with having relevant, high-quality information, and let me just give you a sense of the scale of the challenge and the opportunity here. NOAA alone collects or produces 20 terabytes of data every single day. That's twice the printed collection of the Library of Congress. Structural and other resource limitations mean that about 2 of those terabytes go out the door in published information products. And on those 2 sit virtually all of what Jack was referring to and the value that his company helps people derive from NOAA data. On those 2 sits the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, the Climate Corporation. Any corporate entity active in the weather climate space is feeding off of just those 2 terabytes of feedstock. Imagine if we could get the other 18 out the door. Imagine what value may well lie in that. Our data collection is growing exponentially and will only continue to expand, and at the same time the public appetite for and demand for not only the data but the information, services, and products that can be built on the data continues to increase. That's the NOAA scale of the challenge. USGS, NASA, every other agency in the federal family could give you a similar story of similar scale. And this, to me, really points out why it is so important and so valuable that we take the actions that we're discussing here today to really accelerate the movement, accelerate the availability of this wealth of public data about the climate, about the dynamic of our planets, to applications developers, to innovators, to users worldwide. It will take public-private partnerships. It will take really creative new engagements and modes of interacting together to really even begin to tap the kind of total value that reside in the terabytes and petabytes of data that sit currently within government repositories. NOAA took another step just a few weeks ago and put an RFI out that in fact invites just that kind of open dialogue with industry. What alternative ways of thinking about the universe should we entertain so that all 20 terabytes were out the door and available as an open innovation platform for anyone in near real time? In the weather arena in particular, low latency, near real-time access to these data is absolutely crucial to the value that it contains. Over climate timescales, some of that latency concern goes down, but still timeliness and currency of data will remain very important. We're very proud to be one of the partners in ESRI's Climate Resilience App Challenge, which Jack described very well, and we'll be providing a series of webinars through our, about coastal data sets that people might practice upon for that app in our digital coast and climate.data.gov website. So we're very excited about that. Today's launch will certainly help us accelerate the provision of our data out the front door. We're working hard through that app and through our own RFI to build the kind of public-private partnerships that will remove government infrastructure as a bottleneck to the pace of American innovation and speed the development of new value-added services that allow us to integrate this kind of environmental intelligence into our daily lives in ways that many of us sitting here today perhaps can imagine, but more enticingly, in ways that none of us yet have begun to imagine, as we really get the power of American innovation tapped in. As has been mentioned, one of the first thrusts, one of the first slices through this challenge that we're taking under the climate.data.gov initiative has to do with coastal resilience. And I just want to put a little illustration and emphasis on why that is such an important domain to focus on initially. 23 out of the 25 most densely populated communities in our country are coastal and shoreline communities. They're home to 39% of the nation's people. Our trade in ship bottoms that moves about 95% of the goods and trade in and out of our economy come through the ports and harbors of our country. Coastal tourism and recreation dominate both employment and GDP in the ocean economy sectors, with 1.7 million jobs, or 75% of the employment, and nearly $70 billion of GDP. Hurricane Sandy showed us all very vividly in a very concentrated area what the consequences can be to all of those dimensions of economic well-being and national health when we have major coastal flooding and storm inundations hit our coastlines. Scientists are very confident, the data are very clear at a greater than 90% probability that global sea level will rise by at least 8 inches and possibly up to 6 feet or 2 meters by 2100. Whether and how these coastal communities, this 39% of our population, can plan and prepare for this range of possibilities depends on having the tools and information, the foresight to begin to engage in the conversations about risk and adaptation and preparedness. So today's launch is just the tip of the iceberg. The information on this new website, and I think I'm supposed to have changed a slide here and given you a glimpse of some of the coastal inundation tools that already exist that will be some of the first cognitive bridges. They're both technological bridges to make the data available and then cognitive bridges to help people begin to engage in the data, appreciate what data sets are out there, begin to consider what good uses, what new developments they might make of the data sets that are available. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We put these things up today just to hint at the kinds of directions that we think are enticing, lure some of you, we hope, into working in those arenas. We're very proud of the existing federal efforts that have been made so far to increase coastal resiliency, but they are such modest initial steps. They're not really adequate to the total future at all. We need to go much further within the federal family, and we will. Together with NASA, we're moving forward to develop a more robust coastal resilience and climate resilience toolkit, and you'll see more about that later this summer. But more importantly, we must move together We must move forward to the future together. We need the innovative talent that we have in academia, in the companies represented in this room. We need the infrastructure help and the cognitive tool development help that the entities that we have here today represent. This is not the kind of thing federal agencies do well. Some would say it's not the kind of thing we actually do at all. But you will see, you've seen already in Jack's remarks, and you'll see shortly in Mr. Harper's remarks, hints of what potential is there. And I think we can just look at the weather sector and the vibrancy, the dynamism of the commercial weather enterprise that has grown over the last few decades on the foundation of public investment in keeping the pulse of the planet in a near real-time basis. Just look at that and scale it across every community in all of these timescales. You have a sense of the tremendous potential that we believe and that the President believes lies ahead of us. And we can seize and tap much of that potential if we work together in the way that's contemplated with this initiative. So my thanks to all of you as well who've come out today, who've thrown rocks at us and challenged our thinking and helped us move forward to the point that we're at as we stand here today. More importantly, to those of you who will roll up your sleeves and pick up some extra rocks and keep us moving forward in the weeks and months ahead. I think it's going to be a fabulous, exciting partnership, and we at NOAA are very excited to join with you in pursuing it. Thank you very much.
We are still on time. Our next speaker is Stephen Harper. He is the Global Director for Environment and Energy Policy at the Intel Corporation. In that role, he advises senior management and oversees a staff that manages all of Intel's interactions with governments around the world, as those are related to the environmental and energy performance of Intel's factories and products. Outside of Intel, Mr. Harper serves on the board of directors of the Energy Foundation, the Center for Environmental Policy at American University, and the Chesapeake Conservancy. Mr. Harper.
And in my spare time, I'm Prime Minister of Canada, but that's another story. First time I went to Montreal after his election, I handed my passport over, and the guy looked at me and said, I knew he was an American. No, thank you very much, Dr. Holdren, and I want to especially thank Bina and Brian, who've made this experience a very light touch and a light lift. Intel very much supports the President's Climate Action Plan, and we're very excited to be part of the Climate Data Initiative. The initiative builds, as we all know, on past successful open data initiatives involving a number of other sectors, most notably energy and healthcare. I guess I need to do my slides as well. Okay. Wrong direction. There. This slide is a slide I use often to demonstrate something that's been relatively well accepted at this point, which is that the information and communications technology sector, the direct and indirect footprint, carbon energy footprint, is about 2% of the world's overall footprint. And we're working hard to reduce that footprint by making our factories more efficient, by making our products more efficient. But what's really most important here is the 98% and the increasingly well appreciated fact that our technologies, information communication technologies, and the technologies of many companies that embed ICT in their solutions have increasingly been recognized as part of the solution to climate change. Smart grids, smart cities, telecommuting, et cetera. And the basic underlying story is that if you look at the cost of reducing climate emissions, end-use energy efficiency is almost always the cheapest way to go. The first fuel, the cheapest way to deal with the problem. And a lot of those end-use energy efficiency technologies actually have ICT embedded in them. What's not as well appreciated, but as true as the ICT contribution to solutions on the mitigation side, is the potential for our technologies to be helpful on the resilience side as well. For example, data collection, big data collection and analysis to be able to help communities, for example, do scenario planning around sea level rise and how to make decisions about location of infrastructure, zoning decisions, how to identify areas that could serve as natural buffers. So restoring wetlands, for example. It doesn't all have to be hard engineering. Communities can learn how to better manage their water resources and dealing with climate-related water stress. Intel has been involved in recent years in a couple of different partnerships that have been focused on the role of our technology in helping on the solution side, both mitigation and adaptation. One is a group that I co-chair called Digital Energy, which is active here in the US and China, and another very recently with the Conservancy, the Chesapeake Conservancy, which you'll hear about later, is the Conservation Innovation Center, using ICT applications to develop what we call precision conservation. So this is probably going to be impossible for most of you to read, but it's intended to show an urban landscape and the kinds of places which are now instrumented with sensors. Our industry is full of buzzwords, and right now the big buzzwords are big data, the cloud, and the Internet of everything. And those terms actually do have real content. What's happening increasingly is everything is getting instrumented, and the number of integrated circuits, the number of transistors that are being made and shipped in silicon devices is asymptotically, not asymptotically, but exponentially increasing. And this is driving a lot of the story. We, for example, have major partnerships with the cities of Dublin and London, where we're working with them to instrument various infrastructure systems to help them better track and manage air pollution, traffic, the supply of water, for example, in the city of London. We are also starting to talk with the city of San Jose about doing the very same thing. But the key point I want to make here is that data is data. The data, however big, are not what is going to drive solving or addressing or minimizing the adaptation and resilience problems that we face. That data has to be turned into actionable information. And it's through software and hardware that will take place. And the key has got to be for local communities to decide what are the problems that are priorities for them and how best can the technology be adapted to solve their problems. So what are we announcing today? What are we committing to? We're going to do 3 different hackathons in 3 very different regions facing 3 very different sets of climate mitigation and resilience and adaptation challenges. The Chesapeake Bay, the city of New Orleans, and San Jose. I'm joined by Denise Ross from New Orleans and by Joel Dunn from the Conservancy, who are going to talk about their projects, and so I won't say anything more about them at this point. Esri, I think, undoubtedly will be a key partner in what we do, because Esri's software is ubiquitous out in the landscape. The overall point is we picked very different places with communities that are going to decide for themselves what are the problem statements that they want these hackathons to focus on. What is a hackathon? A hackathon, in general terms, is where you bring a bunch of smart code writers together, you create competitive teams, you give them some data, much of the data coming out of the data initiative, you give them some software tools, and you give them a couple of days to compete against one another to develop the best software solutions to the problems that have been identified on the front end of the event. And these problems are going to be identified by our partners, not by Intel. And we are doing this, we're going to do this in 2014 under the rubric of a program we have had for several years called the Intel Code for Good program. This is the program that last year led the National Day of Civic Hacking, where in, I think, almost 100 cities around the country, hackathons were convened to help develop software tools to deal with municipal and community issues. We've developed a fairly robust methodology for doing these hackathons, but we're going to be the facilitator. The real driver is going to be the communities who are going to sit down and say, here are the problems we want solved, here are the partners we want to be part of solving those problems, and local universities and colleges who will provide the bulk of the coders. I had a couple of interviews today with folks from the press, and they kept saying, well, what is Intel getting out of this? And you know, overall, if we help create a bigger ecosystem for our products, we're going to sell more products. But this is an open data, open software, open source related effort. Our program is called Code for Good, with the emphasis on the words for good. And we hope at the end of this day we'll accomplish, at the end of the project, we'll accomplish two things. One, we'll develop software applications that solve the problems identified by the communities we work with. Secondly, hopefully, those same tools will be adaptable for use in other communities and will build some momentum and contribute to the expansion of the solution sets. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Joel Dunn, who is the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Conservancy, already mentioned. It's an organization whose mission is to ensure the conservation and stewardship of and access to the Chesapeake Bay, its lands, and its rivers. Prior to joining the Conservancy, Joel worked in the Chesapeake region for the Conservation Fund, where he helped establish and expand protection for the national parks, national wildlife refuges, and national trails in the region. Joel.
Well, I am truly honored to be with you today, and honored to be with you for the launch of the White House Climate Data Initiative. I'm Joel Dunn. I'm the director of the Chesapeake Conservancy, but I'm also a lover of the Chesapeake Bay. I love our communities, our unique communities. You go around the bay, and each one is very different, and our wildlife and our history. And our organization really works to strengthen the connection of the public with that watershed and our unique natural and cultural resources. We basically make parks, wildlife refuges, and trails. And I love what I do. I have one slide. There's not much competition with Mr. Dangermann's, but climate change really poses new challenges for the Chesapeake. It's an ecosystem that's already really stressed by pollution, population growth, and increasing development. And with approximately 12,000 miles of coastline, nearly all of them low-lying, the Chesapeake is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise. And that's occurring there at 2 to 3 times the global average rate. The Chesapeake is the third most vulnerable coastline in the nation, behind Louisiana and southern Florida. And sea level rise rose more than a foot in the last 100 years, and it's expected to rise an additional 2 to 4 feet in this next century. We've already lost 13 charted islands. Actually, there's a great book by Bill Cronin, The Disappearing Islands of the Chesapeake, and it's very dramatic what's happening in the Chesapeake Bay. Rising waters and storm surge will create long-term consequences for every tidal coastal community on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries, some more than others. Loss of wetlands will be particularly pronounced, somewhere between 50 and 80%. Places like the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge and the Nanocoke River on the eastern shore of Maryland, which house irreplaceable wildlife, are imminently threatened with permanent inundation. That's a place that's near and dear to my heart. I've spent several years helping to protect lands out at the National Wildlife Refuge, and to find out some more about that, you can Google Blackwater 2100 projects. We've done an in-depth study of what's happening at Blackwater. It's really that bullseye on the map on the left there, the orange area in the Chesapeake Bay. But also millions of people in our region live in neighborhoods that are likely to be affected by rising sea levels over the next 50 years. You take areas like Hampton Roads, Virginia, or my hometown of Annapolis, Maryland, which is pictured on the right here during just right after Hurricane Isabel. These areas are threatened with chronic flooding and significant stormwater pollution issues at the same time. These challenges affect the Chesapeake Conservancy's mission and our signature projects, one of them being the John Smith National Historic Trail throughout the Chesapeake Bay, or the Harriet Tubman National Monument, which is on the border of the Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge. So one way our organization is working to overcome these difficult challenges is by promoting something we're calling conservation innovation. And we're doing that by trying to create new opportunities to advance conservation and thinking differently. These opportunities can be technological or financial or partnership-based, but they're often pulling ideas from industry and repurposing them for conservation and restoration. And for the past 2 years, as Steve mentioned, our Conservation Innovation Center has partnered with Intel and the Digital Energy Group, as well as the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, to take big data on land use and water quality and really convert it to products that advance land and water conservation. And one example is we've taken land use data and we've produced 1 meter by 1 meter land use classified data, and then we've taken digital elevation data where the water is flowing to determine where the water is flowing on the landscape, and simply combined those two to highlight where some priority projects should be placed to improve water quality. Our tools and techniques are resulting in highly targeted interventions that are achieving meaningful impacts for communities and the environment. Similarly, with climate change resilience, there's a lot of data out there, as you all know. But local governments and nonprofit partners that I work with every day have a big challenge, a difficult time using that information to build actionable plans that result in resilient communities and environments. So in support of the White House Climate Data Initiative, the Conservancy will partner with the White House, with Intel, and with Esri to do a Chesapeake Hackathon in 2014 to really pilot the application of public data related to climate change. Through the Chesapeake Hackathon, we intend to facilitate the development of apps and other tools to help our community better understand the potential impacts of both land use decisions and better prepare for the impacts of climate change, particularly sea level rise. Basically, we want to turn data into insight. We want to help enable innovation by encouraging creativity, by making information more easily accessible, and enhancing collaboration across the public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors. We really want to get the universities involved in what we're doing and get those kids engaged in this effort. We hope this will lead to the development in less hazardous areas, and certainly the conservation of natural infrastructure, protecting properties from storm surge, filtering pollution, and providing wildlife habitat and recreational opportunities. We want to ensure that existing sea level projections and land use planning objectives will culminate in communities that are more resilient to climate change. We believe that the right information and tools, with the right information and tools, coastal communities can more easily pursue land protection, economic development, and climate change adaptation in sync with one another. In closing, I can promise that the Chesapeake Conservancy will do our part to make this project a success and a replicable model that can be used in other regions around the country, and we're honored to be a partner with Intel and the White House on this important initiative. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Denise Ross, who directs the Information Strategy Enterprise for the City of New Orleans. Denise is a nationally recognized leader in the democratization of data. She works to build and connect open data systems among government agencies and with the public in areas as diverse as community planning, blight reduction, and emergency preparedness and response. Denise.
New Orleans has a long history of resiliency. We've faced major weather events, sinking lands, rising seas, and eroding coastlines, all while protecting our 350,000 residents and hosting upwards of 9 million visitors a year. For the next few minutes, I'll give a short history of open data and resiliency in New Orleans. For background, I moved to the city in 2001 to work with a local data intermediary focused on building the capacity of neighborhoods and the nonprofit sector to use data for strategic decision-making. Back in 2001, those were exciting times. It was the first release of decennial census data since the dawn of the internet. There was great promise that we could truly democratize data, and federal statistics were the backbone of our work. In 2005, a hurricane named Katrina came our way. The federal levee system failed, and 80% of our city was underwater. The Census 2000 data that we used to use was rendered instantly historical as our residents scattered. We had a lot of work to do and a lot of decisions to make, but we were flying blind. Federal statistical systems weren't designed to keep up with our rapidly changing situation. The concept of open data didn't really exist yet. There was no access to administrative or transactional data from federal, state, or local government. Getting basic data was an arduous task that involved FOIA or public records requests, and often came with restrictive data sharing agreements. Case in point, we chased the data on this slide for years before we actually got to see it. In fact, back in November of 2005, a Brookings researcher commented it had been easier gathering data for Iraq than for New Orleans. In the absence of government data, the citizens of New Orleans started collecting data themselves to track property condition and inform the myriad decisions that needed to be made. All of this primary data collection depended on a foundational city data set, the parcel layer, basically the rectangles of land that people own. Neighborhoods, nonprofits, developers all needed this parcel layer, but there was no culture of open data in local government. So, not surprisingly, a bootleg copy of the parcel layer hit the streets. There was a guy, he worked for a local nonprofit. He became a personal clearinghouse for this parcel layer. Even federal agencies like FEMA came to this private citizen to get this government data set. This data set was so high value that when I came to City Hall more than 5 years after the storm, we were still averaging 1 request a week for the parcel layer. Local government had been saying no for so long to releasing this data that nobody remembered why we weren't releasing it in the first place. We developed criteria for our nascent open data initiative and made the parcel layer public. We now have dozens of high-value data sets like this in our open data platform. 9 years out from Katrina, data on property condition is still relevant. Until recently, we depended on U.S. Postal Service data as a proxy for storm-damaged and blighted properties. However, that data set changed, and it wasn't granular enough in the first place, so we are developing a methodology for the city to create its own data on property condition. We envision a process where we rapidly collect street-level imagery, spatially join it to existing property records, crowdsource the scoring of property condition, and make public all of the results. Once we have it, we'll layer the property condition data with federal open data to provide a more complete picture of risk and resiliency. And we'll use it to develop strategies for rainwater retention areas to reduce risk of flooding. Immediately after a catastrophic event, we would score post-disaster imagery to rapidly assess potential for repopulation and the need for support services such as mobile clinics and temporary housing. During recovery, a property condition census conducted at regular intervals would be used to deploy case management and other services to push neighborhoods over the recovery tipping point. Now, with the launch of the Climate Data Initiative and the hackathon that Stephen mentioned earlier, we have a venue for cross-city, cross-sector collaboration and a means for sharing the tools we develop for New Orleans. Partners we've been talking to include the humanitarian OpenStreetMaps team, who developed a similar system after Sandy using aerial imagery, and Loveland Technologies, a civic startup in Detroit that has developed a mobile tool to collect property condition data. And most importantly, we have our neighborhood leaders who have been doing this work on their own for years out of necessity. The Climate Data Initiative ties right in with Mayor Mitch Landrieu's larger resiliency agenda. For example, high-speed, affordable broadband will ensure that folks have easy access to the data and tools they need. And it has the potential to open up new streams of data with sensors monitoring our infrastructure. After our experience with data around Katrina, I can tell you in New Orleans we plan to take full advantage of climate.data.gov to help us prepare for future shocks and bounce back from them faster and stronger with greater accountability and equity.
It's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ellen Stoffen, who is NASA's chief scientist. She serves as principal advisor to the NASA Administrator, Charlie Bolden, on all of the agency's science programs and science-related investments. She has had an amazing research career. Her research is focused on the geology of Venus, Mars, Saturn's moon Titan. She's an associate member of the Cassini mission to Saturn radar team and a co-investigator on the Mars Express mission's Marsis sounder. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Ellen Stoffen.
Thank you. At NASA, we're known for exploring new worlds with rovers, like on Mars, for scientific experiments on the International Space Station, and a vast array of missions exploring our sun, our neighboring planets, and the distant universe. Of all the planets that we have explored, none have yet matched the complex, dynamic world that we call home. We have a long history of exploring Earth. For decades, we have designed, built, and launched Earth-observing missions to return valuable information about this complex planet. In 2014, we are building on this legacy with 5 new Earth-observing missions, more than NASA has conducted in a single year in over a decade. These missions will provide global measurements of precipitation, soil moisture, atmospheric carbon dioxide, winds, clouds, and aerosols. And I'm pleased to say of the 5, one is already up there, the Global Precipitation Mission, which we did with the Japanese Space Agency that was recently launched and is ready to start work. Studying the Earth as a system is essential to understand the causes and consequences of climate change and other global environmental concerns. These sustained global Earth observations made with our partners are needed to monitor and study the Earth's climate system, land use, and land cover change, as well as to monitor the impact of weather and extreme environmental events. In addition to global Earth observations, NASA's Earth Science Program conducts and enables research that provides critical information for the nation's decision makers, first responders, and communities regarding climate change and extreme weather. For example, we are working proactively within NASA to protect our own national assets from the potential impacts of climate change. We just heard about the Chesapeake Bay, from our own Wallops Island facility here in Virginia to the Space Coast of Florida. We're bringing together our Earth science researchers and our strategic infrastructure managers to provide climate-related decision support in the face of sea level rise and serious coastal challenges. Since the beginning, NASA has assembled an interdisciplinary set of data systems, a highly capable one-stop shop that allows access to and discovery of space-based, research-generated data across all of Earth system science. Given our experience with large-scale interdisciplinary data integration, we welcomed the challenge to take on a leadership role in this first phase of the Climate Data Initiative, to integrate government-wide federal data sets across all disciplines that may have an effect on coastal flooding, and to make these data sets easily available. Hand in hand with our partners, we are very pleased to open the climate.data.gov gateway today with more than 100 curated high-quality data sets, web services, and tools that can be leveraged by innovators to help communities prepare for the future. We appreciate this opportunity to collaborate with our partners at NOAA and the many other federal agencies involved in this initiative. This resource is in its beta phase, and we welcome feedback on how to improve it and to make it more helpful. So please use it and let us know how it goes. NASA has a long history of engaging and exciting generations of global citizens to use publicly available data to design innovative solutions to improve life on Earth and in space. The launch of climate.data.gov will support and unleash new solutions in an area that is certainly the most critical of our generation. Along with the launch of climate.data.gov, I am delighted to announce that today, NASA and NOAA are together launching an innovation challenge based on federal cross-agency data to encourage entrepreneurs, technologists, and developers to create and deploy data-driven visualizations and simulations that will help people understand their exposure to coastal inundation hazards and other vulnerabilities. The Coastal Flooding Challenge is part of NASA's third International Space Apps Challenge, a 2-day global mass collaboration event taking place this year on April 12th and 13th. Last year's event involved more than 9,000 global participants at 83 locations, engaging directly with NASA to develop awe-inspiring software, hardware, and data visualizations. This year, we will introduce around 40 robust challenges clustered in 5 themes: asteroids, Earthwatch, human spaceflight, robotics, and space technology. The Coastal Inundation in Your Community Challenge is one of the 4 climate-related challenges using data provided by NASA, NOAA, and the EPA. Solutions developed through this challenge could have many potential impacts, including helping coastal businesses determine if they are currently at risk from coastal inundation and if they will be impacted in the future by sea level rise and coastal erosion. I encourage all of you to roll up your sleeves and get involved in this challenging and energizing event by visiting spaceappschallenge.org. In addition to the Space Apps Challenge, another way to get involved is to come work for NASA as a Presidential Innovation Fellow. We are currently recruiting potential fellows to, among other things, work with us to make our Earth observation data even more open, more machine readable, and to make our climate data easily findable and usable by innovators developing new climate resilience tools. I'd like to congratulate the entire Climate Data Initiative team for their hard work on this initial phase of climate.data.gov. I look forward to the rollout of additional data sets and the opportunity to continue working with this esteemed community of public and private partners. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted now to introduce Rachel Kite, who is the World Bank's Group Vice President and Special Envoy for Climate Change. She oversees work on climate change adaptation, mitigation, climate finance, taking place across the institutions of the World Bank Group. She previously served as the World Bank Vice President for Sustainable Development and was the International Finance Corporation's Vice President for Business Advisory Services and a member of its management team. Rachel.
Good afternoon. I have a 9-year-old son who might be interested in being a fellow, so if I could catch you on the way out, that would be great. I am really delighted to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation to the World Bank Group to be here, and to be here in the company of so many colleagues and partners. It's really an honor. I want to take you from New Orleans through NASA to the most vulnerable people in the poorest parts of the world, where we spend so much time focusing. We know that climate change may upend our core mission to eradicate poverty, to underpin prosperity. And we know that their economies are already being battered by the increasingly severe and intense storms, the worsening droughts, the scarcity of water, which is bringing economic fragility. So the economic losses that we've seen are rising vastly. So in the 1980s, it was common that the economic losses from climate-related disasters would be in the region of $50 billion a year. And in the last decade, it's much more common for that to be $200 billion a year and rising. About 3/4 of those losses are a result of extreme weather. The human cost of those disasters is rising as well. Rapid urbanization, the inadequate preparation puts millions of people at risk every day. Moving forward, it's abundantly clear that the reduction of disaster risk, especially in relation to climate change, must be heavily embedded in all of our development efforts. So we believe strongly that we have to move from a tradition of response to a culture of prevention and a culture of resilience. To better understand the threats posed by natural hazards, we will need sound, credible science and data and evidence. Guaranteeing broad access to risk information allows for the necessary peer review to ensure that risk assessments are trustworthy and actionable. Open and transparent data also enables constructive dialogue and builds the political consensus needed to make tough decisions at the local, municipal, regional, national level, and to take action to reduce those risks. Perhaps more importantly, accessible data allows for and encourages collaboration between the many stakeholders, just as we have in this room today, in the pursuit of climate resilience, from local community members to international organisations, aid, and other agencies and government itself. At the World Bank, we have for many years been committed to open data and to supporting and engaging the open data community. And now we have a chance to really sort of apply that and the lessons learned into the field of climate resilience. The Open Data for Resilience initiative, which if you make an acronym out of it, which of course we do, we make acronyms out of everything, gives you Open Dry, is one example of this commitment and builds on the bank's broader open data initiative. Since its launch in 2011, it's been active in over 25 countries, opening up to the public thousands of databases previously locked in proprietary arrangements or fragmented within the bureaucratic silos. As rapid urbanisation and changing climate risks threaten to make existing data obsolete, just as was so eloquently put forward from my colleague from New Orleans, Open Dry goes beyond simply making existing data accessible to providing those new platforms for data creation and for communication. In Jakarta, where we've been working with our global facility for disaster reduction and recovery, along with Australian and Indonesian facility for disaster reduction, we've been able to train more than 500 community members to help with a participatory mapping that collects data on thousands of hospitals, schools, private buildings, and critical infrastructure. An innovative free software called InnerSafe, developed under this partnership, then allows users to combine extensive mapping projects like that in Jakarta with hazard data to create rapid, actionable assessments of damage that a disaster might cause. Today, from Sri Lanka to Bangladesh to Nepal, citizens with smartphones, GPS systems, are contributing to open source tools like InnerSafe that can help inform policy and build resilient communities from the ground up. And so, to help scale up these efforts today, and I've got a hard copy, the 20th century copy here, we're excited to launch the Field Guide. It's a practical manual designed to help governments and organisations streamline open data projects. It describes more than 4 years' work towards building standards on open creation and communication of climate and disaster risk data. We're going to present this field guide tomorrow at the Building Climate and Disaster Resilience through Open Data and Innovation workshop, which we're hosting. I think many of you are going to join us, and you're very, very welcome. We look forward to seeing you, and we hope that others will join in other upcoming events, including, I think very importantly, the Understanding Risk Forum, which will happen in June in London, which will draw over 1,000 participants from all sectors across the world, from the disaster risk management field, to really focus in on how we can understand risk and start to manage, mitigate, and avoid. In addition to these events, we're committed to sharing this field guide with many more partners by 2016. In closing, I just want to say that it means so much to us that our largest shareholder and our closest shareholder is showing the kind of leadership that it is. The Climate Action Plan brought forward last year by the President has changed the way that the table is laid internationally. And this kind of launch of this timely climate data initiative really brings to the practical level the kind of partnerships between the public and private sector that are going to be so important at the community level, at the municipal, regional, national, and international level. We pledge to be working alongside all of you as the open data community continues to drive our understanding of and our ability to prepare for the risks of a changing climate. The citizens of the 9th Ward have an awful lot in common with the citizens of the Sundarbans or the citizens of of Jakarta, and it is only when we all work together that we will help to build their resilience. Thank you very much.
The last speaker in our distinguished series, preceding my extensive closing remarks, will be Rebecca Moore of Google. She is an engineering manager at Google, where she launched and leads the development of the Google Earth Engine, which is a remarkable technology platform that puts an unprecedented amount of satellite imagery online for the first time and enables scientists to conduct global-scale monitoring and measurement of changes in the Earth's environment. Rebecca also conceived and leads the Google Earth Outreach Program, which supports nonprofits, communities, and indigenous people around the world as they apply Google's mapping tools to pressing challenges. Rebecca.
Hello, everyone. So my first week on the job at Google in 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. NOAA was flying aerial imagery hourly, collecting very high-resolution imagery of where levees were breaking, where flooding was happening, where bridges were washing out, but didn't actually have the technology to make that available to the first responders in a way that was useful. We had just launched this thing called Google Earth 2 months earlier, and we came together on a collaboration to publish that data. Our team worked round the clock, 24 hours. Eric Schmidt, our CEO, came down and said, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. If Google Earth can be used to save lives, do it. So I want to show you, see if this will play. Brian, you promised me it would play. Okay. There's more videos coming. All right. What you would have seen, if Brian met his promise, is not to put too much, but we had the high resolution imagery we were stitching together in near real time and publishing that. So the first responders were actually getting phone calls from people saying, I'm trapped on the roof at 123 Smith Street. We're going into the Google Earth, entering the address, getting the latitude, longitude, flying in this special Katrina globe of Google Earth, and getting the information about how to effect the rescue. We got a phone call from the Coast Guard later saying, using Google Earth, they had saved the lives of more than 4,000 people. So this opened a lot of eyes at Google because people had been thinking of it as more of a recreational tool than a tool that could save lives. So as we looked at this call to action by the president, we were thinking about, in terms of climate resilience, what could Google offer? Well, one thing we have is a lot of computers. We can store a lot of data, and we can do a lot of number crunching or data processing on that. We also have a tremendous reach to the public. I work on the Google Earth and Maps team. We have more than 1 billion users of Google Maps every month. More than 1 billion people have downloaded Google Earth. More than 1 million custom Google Maps websites are out there. It's the most popular API on the web today. And so we wondered what if we could, and of course this is a bit aspirational, but what if we could use the computing power of Google and the broad reach with the public to make helping the public understand and prepare for these risks of climate change as accessible as using Google Maps to get driving directions. Now that probably sounds crazy, but that's what we want to try to do, working with many of you. As I mentioned, there's more than 1 million of these incredibly innovative websites out there powered by our API. Those developers could be put to work building climate resilience apps. A first example of where we really did this at scale was when NASA and the USGS opened up the Landsat archive in 2008. This is a 40-year treasure trove of satellite imagery of the planet. Enlightened government policy has made it open and free, and it had never been online. It had never been accessible before. It was sitting on tapes in a vault in South Dakota. So we thought, what if we could bring it online and actually begin to apply our computing power to extract unprecedented information from that? It took several years of working with USGS and NASA, but we now have the entire Landsat archive online, and we're getting the fresh imagery as it's collected every day. So when you have all that imagery, what can you do? Well, you can start to do things like remove clouds, because when you have every single picture of the planet, you can pick all the good pixels and you can create essentially a complete cloud-free picture of the planet. This is what it often looks like, but with enough data, you can produce this kind of cloud-free imagery. We applied Google Earth Engine, the technology my team has built, to the Landsat catalog and built the world's first 15-meter, Landsat scale, cloud-free map of the cloud-free image of the entire planet. Thank you very much to USGS and NASA for the Landsat satellite. We also said, well, we want to kind of see how the Earth is changing over time. And so we stitched together every year from 1984 to 2012 a complete image, cloud-free image of the planet, and put that in the hands of the public. It was more than 2 million hours of computation, but because we ran it over 66,000 computers, we had it in a couple of days. It would have taken 300 years on a single computer. So this video worked. Thank you, Brian. Okay, you're back in my good graces. Las Vegas is growing while Lake Mead shrinks. This is 1984 to 2012. You put that in people's hands, they get it in seconds. You don't have to give them a 20-page document explaining sustainable water use. So then we began to put, now that we had the Landsat archive, we had all this computing power, we put this in the hands of the scientific community. And for example, working with Matt Hansen, who's now at the University of Maryland, we were measuring where forests have been lost in Colorado. We then further worked with him to create the world's first high-resolution map of forest cover and change from 2000 to 2012. We published that last November, published that in Science Magazine, and again, it's this first, there's never been a map before where you could understand in high resolution where there was forest and deforestation was happening. I encourage you to explore it. This was the first, I think, major significant result of Earth Engine. Now that that data set exists that we extracted, by the way, also from Landsat data, that is the foundation base map for a new tool that is in the hands of everyone called Global Forest Watch, which we launched a couple of weeks ago with World Resources Institute. This is, again, it's a picture of the world's forest, and then we are issuing alerts based upon daily satellite imagery that's coming in, showing areas of suspicious change. So there's now kind of a dashboard for the world's forest. It never has existed before. So with that as the background, what if we turned this technology to climate resilience? This is an example of a kind of a traditional static graphic image that is showing the severe drought we've been experiencing in California. It's great, but that's all there is. You can't interact with it. It's low resolution. It comes out monthly or sometimes every 6 months. There's not that much you can do with it. We're announcing today that we're partnering with the institutions who produce this to now, let's say, power it to be near real time, high resolution, interactive, and we'll be putting that in the hands for the entire United States. So that will be coming out. Another application related to climate change is managing dwindling water resources. The Ogallala Aquifer is diminishing. There's contention over agricultural watering and water consumption, but there hasn't been high-resolution data about agricultural water consumption that's easily in the hands of everyone. We're working again with science partners to make this available for the whole world. We again expect these things to be millions of hours of computation, but we've got lots of computers. I wanted to go out of the United States and actually go to Australia because we're doing a project with the Australian government They are collecting LiDAR data for some of these island nations that are already beginning to see the impacts of sea level rise. They are doing high LiDAR level, high resolution collects, and they approached us and they said, could we give you this digital elevation model LiDAR data, and you do the magic, you stitch it together, you make it available to those island nations, and then let us work together to produce these derivative types of visualizations where people can actually see their homes going underwater. It's one thing to have a map, it's another thing to have your home, right? We have much of the world in high resolution. People can see their homes. And when you can make that connection between a model climate event and your home, it can change the game. This is one of the things we're hoping to do. The information is apparently the public believes that climate change is real, but they put it extremely low priority as something to deal with. So they know, but they don't care. And I think with tools like this, we hope to help people internalize the risk and care. So to make the announcement, in order to produce that high-resolution elevation model that was, for example, what Australia was using for the whole world, is about a petabyte of data. Some of that data exists in many different places. Some of it has not yet even been collected. But we're throwing down the gauntlet to the global community, and we're saying, we will give you a petabyte of data, we will handle all the storage, bring on your data, we will stitch it together, and we would like to work with the community to produce the world's first high-resolution global DEM that could model sea level rise storm surges with unprecedented accuracy everywhere in the world for every coastal community, every riverine community in the world. We're also donating 50 million CPU hours of the computation in our cloud to be able to produce those unprecedented high-resolution, near real-time products for everyone in the world. And again, we've got partnerships with a lot of leading scientific institutions in the space. We hope to do for climate resilience the kinds of impacts we were having in forest. So in closing, we want to make people care. Thank you very much.